There are 5 intriguing reports from near-death experiences that are difficult to explain unless consciousness actually does survive bodily death. Here's what I mean. You will very often hear about people seeing amazing colors during their NDE that do not exist in common experience. So where do these colors come from? Well, they cannot be manufactured by the brain, for one thing. Here's why. Other colors that you see actually come from a combination of 3 colors that your eyes can detect: red, green, and blue. But it's the brain that is responsible for all the colors you can see, and it does a very good job. Along with the eyes, it combines these 3 colors into a staggering estimated 10 million different colors if you account for all the different shades. But the parts of your brain that allow you to perceive these colors are not equipped to produce new ones. In the end, you still only perceive a tiny portion of all that exists. It's essentially like being mostly blind. So again, where do these amazing colors reported in NDEs come from? There's a growing view that, contrary to mainstream belief that the brain somehow creates consciousness, consciousness actually exists independently of the brain. There's scientific support for this, and a lot of well-known scientists and philosophers are promoting that view. If consciousness exists independently of the brain, it, by definition, survives death, and that means you. But there's more. The brain acts like a filter as it narrows down the information you can perceive. If you could take that filter away and your consciousness continues, it would be like taking off dirty sunglasses. You, consciousness, would experience reality in full. So I find it very interesting that people who've had NDEs report colors they've never seen before. We can explain this through the removal of that filter when the brain dies, giving you an appreciation of reality that has suddenly expanded. This directly relates to the next point, that people undergoing NDEs also experience 300-degree vision. Common in NDEs is the realization that one is seeing everything all at once. For example, not just what is in front of you, but also what is in the back of you, above or below. If consciousness survives bodily death, this makes perfect sense. Here's why. As human beings, along with other animals having eyes up front, there's an advantage to having eyes in front of the head. It creates an overlap that gives rise to what is known as binocular vision, which in turn allows you to see depth and how far objects are from you. But there's a drawback to this advantage, which is that you can only see a fraction of the world, the one that's immediately in front of you, and you need to turn your head or body to see what else is around you. This is the price you pay for living in a physical body, and we're so used to it that we don't question it. But if you could still exist without that body, and didn't have to rely on eyes and a brain to see, the experience you would have may not be the same as seeing in the sense that we understand. But that experience will be obviously freed from the body's limitations, so as to allow you to experience everything all at once. Near-death experiences also report a reality that is more real than real. Here's why that's important. The brain can be nudged toward a heightened experience of reality with certain psychedelic drugs like LSD, where the perception of lights, colors, and sound can be felt more intensely. Okay, so what does that have to do with NDEs? You're going to find this interesting, so bear with me on this one. While data has so far indicated that drugs like LSD work by increasing brain activity, there's some evidence challenging this notion by suggesting that these drugs work by actually decreasing activity in regions of the brain. In other words, start turning down the volume on these structures and a more intense reality opens up. This implies that there are mechanisms in the brain that diminish your perception of reality. And when these mechanisms are taken out of the way, reality can be experienced more intensely. The argument that the brain actually constrains consciousness and prevents it from expressing itself fully was already made by Aldous Huxley in the 50s. In addition, The brain is not designed to give you a true version of reality, but its own version that is fine-tuned and just good enough to allow you to function. I have a video on that gives you the idea in a nutshell, called Is Reality Real? But don't take my word for it. The idea is not new. And if interested, I encourage you to check out Donald Hoffman's work at the University of California at Irvine, because he brings us actual data on this. All this implies that if you could meet a reality no longer diminished and altered by the brain, that reality should be more tangible, more rich, with no doubt as to its existence. Because your experience of reality, with the filtering brain out of the way, should feel closer, more intimate, and presumably more vivid. Now, when the brain flatlines, which is usually what happens during NDEs, the brain's influence stops. And if the dampening effect of the brain is taken away, your experience of reality should be intensified. It should feel as though dying is like waking from a blurry, confusing dream. And as many people who have experienced NDEs will tell you, it's exactly like that. It's like waking from a dream. This is why they say their experience is undeniable, almost overwhelming in its intensity, and very, very real. Now quickly, if you want to see more of this type of content, go ahead and subscribe. And if you appreciate it, give it a like. Some NDEs are simply difficult to explain away as hallucinations, because at times the experience reveals something to the individual that they could not have known otherwise. Eben Alexander, a Harvard neurosurgeon whose brain was virtually destroyed by a serious bacterial infection, was able to recall a presence during his remarkable, highly publicized NDE. Years later, after finally locating his birth family that he had never met, he receives a photo from them. He recognized the person in the photo immediately. It's the same person he encountered during his NDE. She is his sister, Betsy, whom he also had never met in person. Betsy had died in 1998, 10 years before Eben Alexander saw her in his near-death experience. He recognized her beyond doubt. It was, in his own words, crystal clear that it was her in that picture. Another important case is that of Pam Reynolds, whose body during surgery was reduced to 50 degrees Fahrenheit. Your normal body temperature is between 97 to 99 degrees Fahrenheit. Her heart stopped and her blood drained from the brain, which of course flatlined. She was as close to clinical death as you can get. Now her eyes were taped shut, yet she saw specific details from above and heard a female voice that she believed to be a cardiologist commenting on having problems with Pam's arteries. She also saw an instrument that she said resembled an electric toothbrush. Both of these experiences were validated afterwards. The voice Pam heard was that of a woman who was a cardiologist and confirmed she commented on a problem while working on Pam's arteries in her leg. And the electric toothbrush closely resembled the instrument that was actually used in surgery. Pam also could not have heard anything that would have given her any clue as to what was going on. They put blocking earphones in her ears that made loud clicking noises. Hearing anything in that room was simply out of question, a fact confirmed by her own surgeon. Now, these cases are famous ones, but are certainly not the only ones. And to explain them via conventional means, you have to jump through a lot of hoops. As already stated, science is coming around to the idea that consciousness may not actually be created by the brain. The intriguing conclusion that some have reached is that it could exist everywhere, as a fundamental property of reality, like gravity or mass. This view that it is universal, known as panpsychism, was recently debated at a conference in the state of New York. So how could people have knowledge of things they could not have known about when they come back from the brink of death? And how could Eben Alexander's experience be explained by a brain that had been so badly damaged? The simplest explanation is that their consciousness was not confined to their brain. This explains NDEs fully. Many death experiences report that they experience time differently, that time does not pass at the same rate, that time does not exist, that past, present, and future occur simultaneously, that time has no meaning. Does this make any sense? There are in fact good reasons to believe that the passage of time is an illusion of the brain. I discussed this in more detail in other videos and other support from the science behind it. But what does it mean that time is an illusion? After all, it seems real enough. Let's assume it is possible for you to turn off the brain's internal clock that is responsible for giving you a sense that time passes. That is, in fact, possible. There's a condition called dyschronometria, or time blindness, in which the individual affected can no longer judge how much time has passed. If you were to lose your sense of time completely, you would no longer experience events as occurring in a particular order. Past, present, and future would all merge into one because you would be unable to differentiate between them. There's a prevalent view in physics called the block theory of the universe, which is supported by MIT physicist Max Tegmark. In this theory, the past, present, and future all in fact exist at once, and time does not pass. It's only a perception of the brain. The findings of Stanford University David Eagleman also strongly suggest that the flow of time is indeed just an illusion. Take the brain away, and if consciousness persists, your experience of reality, no longer obscured by the illusion of time, should become timeless. It's simply interesting that NDE reports sound a lot like the timeless. I'd love to hear from those of you who've had this experience. What was your experience of time? Does it fit what I've said so far? Scientific studies of NDEs have been carried out for decades. For example, in the Division of Perceptual Studies at the University of Virginia, where headway is being made in support of the continuation of consciousness after the body expires. Overall, thousands of papers have been published about the near-death experience, and many doctors with experience in the phenomenon affirm that there is life after death. Absolute proof is difficult because the experience is subjective. You have to rely on what people say about what they saw and felt. But the converging evidence that support what I brought up in this video is piling up. NDEs are simply becoming increasingly harder to explain. And I personally would like to see more interest in the phenomenon from the scientific community. If consciousness is understood not to be magically born out of the brain, but something that exists independently, then the near-death experience has just received its simplest explanation, and one that is consistent with the conclusions of many powerful scholars and thinkers. You do not die.